We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
More breaking news now, and the latest data shows the planet is on course for 2.6 degrees of warming this century if nations continue their current trajectory. That's according to this year's emissions gap report by the UN. It says the chances of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is virtually zero. Let's bring in our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, for more on this. So Tom, afternoon to you. 1.5 not alive anymore then?
Well, not necessarily, but certainly it doesn't look great. The reason for this is, despite the fact we've seen a huge shift to renewable sources of energy like wind and solar power around the globe, and the costs of those things falling, the rate of emissions reductions are happening no way fast enough to get us on track for that 1.5 degree target, which 196 nations agreed to try and meet in Paris in 2015, and if they couldn't get there, they had to keep it well below 2 degrees. Well, what today's report from the United Nations Environment Programme, called the Emissions Gap Report, to try and distill that, they put it out annually, has found is that rather than shrink, emissions are continuing to rise despite all that effort. In fact, they rose between 2022 and 2023 more than they did in the previous decade preceding the COVID pandemic, and that's partly because we're burning too much fossil fuels globally. The countries that are still growing their emissions, like China, Saudi Arabia, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, are doing so much faster than countries like our own, and other developed countries are seeing their emissions peak and begin to very slowly fall. So a lot more effort has to be done on current trends, even if countries meet all of the carbon cutting pledges they have put towards the UN process so far. We're still heading for between 2.6 and 2.8 degrees of warming, which would be pretty catastrophic for the current habitability of the planet, or at least as our human societies see it. So that's pretty bad news. However, there is some room for optimism in there, because they also do analysis on how many options there are to try and see this off and whether they're affordable, and conclude that there's actually enough affordable emissions cutting potential through things like reversing deforestation and rolling out more of those cheaper, cleaner, renewable energy technologies to actually get us to 1.5 degrees and comfortably get to 2 degrees. But it involves enormous political leadership. It would involve a very massive effort to roll those things out. And it would also, of course, cost a huge amount of money, around about $1 trillion to $2 trillion a year between now and 2050 to reach 1.5 degrees. However, a little bit of context around that, picking up off the Rachel Reeves news, there's 110 trillion moves through the global economy and financial markets every year. So that 2 trillion a year is a fraction of the total that actually moves around. It's just about re-nosing it. So net zero doesn't necessarily mean the economy grinding to a halt, but 3 degrees of warming almost certainly would.
Where is the emergency broadcast?
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
No one is coming to save us.